The Vikings wide receiver room is kind of falling apart. What do we do now? Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making Locked On Vikings your first listen of the day every single day. I appreciate you all so very much. Today is Town Hall Tuesday. That means I'm answering your questions and responding to your hot takes as submitted to me via the Google form in the show notes. And boy, a lot of you did that. So if you have questions for me throughout the week or just a hot take that you want to confess anonymously, anybody can submit in the Google form, which is in the show notes or YouTube description to any episode. Type it out, leave it there. I'll get to it the next Tuesday. First question I am going to answer today comes from Javier, who asks, how serious of an issue is the depth at wide receiver? With Addison being out the first 3 weeks and Nailor currently injured, I did not see anything special from our depth guys on Saturday that made me comfortable with them playing meaningful snaps to start the year. I'd love to bring in a veteran to help. So, let me give you a rundown of the situation. Justin Jefferson returned to practice, and Christian Darrisaw, by the way, first time practicing without a knee brace, so that's got to be good news. There was really no question about if Justin Jefferson would be able to practice and play before week 1. It's nice to see him returning to practice a couple weeks before, so, he's got a little time to knock the rust off. But that's not really where the concern is. Obviously, Addison and Nailor, that's where the concern is. So Nailor has a jammed hand is the only thing we've ever heard about it. But he's week to week. And O'Connell didn't say the nature of the injury, if it's something dislocated or fractured or, strained or whatever. But he's week to week with it is what he said, which is not as good as day to day or we're not worried or he'll be back soon or any of those things. It's week to week. That could mean that he is in jeopardy of missing week 1. And that means that your wide receiver group would probably be in, 11 personnel, Jefferson, Ty Felton, Lucky Jackson. It's not Miles Price. He did some interesting stuff as a returner, but he got a ton of mental mistakes in the offense, and I don't think the coaches would trust him from scrimmage. So those are your 3 guys on the team, I think, that are like rosterable. And even Ty Felton hasn't really done anything to stick out on second and even third team units. It's just that he's a draft pick, so he's going to make the team, and he's got the special teams acumen. But that is not a group that is inspiring. Even with TJ Hawkinson as part of the mix, that is still a pretty rough group of receivers. So I do think that you need to bring in a veteran to help if you're really worried that Nailor is going to miss time. If they don't bring in anybody and then Nailor misses week 1, I think they've misplayed this. Doug Dimmadome, owner of the Dimsdale Dimmadomes, says receiver depth is, I love it when this guy asks questions because I get to say it. Receiver depth is looking a little spooky. Scary Terry time? I know we've talked about Brandon Powell, but there are also Tyler Boyd, Gabe Davis, Aguilar, Amari Cooper, Bueller, anyone? What are the odds we pick someone up and who is the most intriguing? So Brandon Powell is probably the main name that you're going to hear. It's the one that makes the most sense. He's a free agent. He knows the system. He also offers punt return capabilities, which the Vikings are pretty sorely hurting for as well, with Rondale Moore going down and nobody else really jumping up to take that job until Miles Price maybe did with a couple of interesting returns. But that's a long way from being decided, and they've still got a 4-way open competition in practices, according to the local beat. So there's a whole bunch of people. You could bring in a veteran like that, like Tyler Boyd would be pretty awesome. I've always liked Tyler Boyd. I think that's fun. The old Odell Beckham thing. I want Odell Beckham. I don't need him to be good at all. I just want Odell Beckham to play on the same team as Justin Jefferson. I think that would just be so cute. For those who don't know, Beckham is basically like an older brother to Jefferson, has known Jefferson since he was a little kid. They would play in the backyard together with his brothers because he was a teammate at LSU of Justin Jefferson's older brother. So they've known each other for a long time, and I just think it'd be cute. But in terms of people who actually would figure to help the offense, yeah, you definitely need somebody. Brandon Powell was in the stands on Saturday, by the way, watching that debacle on both special teams and from scrimmage, wide receiver wise. So I'm sure he is waiting by the phone. Josh Oliver, enjoyer, says, how has Ty Felton done so far in training camp and preseason as a receiver compared to your draft evaluation? This is an interesting moment for Ty Felton, who could who will have an opportunity if they don't bring somebody else in to maybe get in there from scrimmage in a real regular season game. And if he gets a couple of interesting plays, right, gets hot a little bit, he could work his way into the rotation more. Like this could be a career defining moment if he goes out on Monday Night Football and like makes a couple plays in week 1. For me, as a receiver, it's a lot of the same of what I saw at Maryland. You can see that he's fast. You can see like that his routes are easy enough to cover where, you know, he has made some separation sometimes against man coverage, but not consistently. A lot of his production has just been like finding the hole in the zone and being precise about that, which is where a lot of it came in Maryland too. And that's a good skill. And then in special teams and as like a ball carrier, he wants to dance with everybody. You got to like have a plan if you're going to juke somebody, but all he wants to do is like just like wiggle and do the kind of college juke that works on a future like paralegal, but not necessarily on an NFL player. So it's a lot of the same of that. And I think he's still got a way to go before he is an NFL receiver in earnest. But from special teams, what I saw in the Maryland special teams was, I think I probably had too small of a sample. I think 2 games of special teams probably isn't enough where it is enough, I think, from scrimmage. You know, there's like 100 plays. So you can start to get a sense, get a pattern. It's like 25 plays on special teams, and I don't think I got a good enough sense. I probably ran with a conclusion about him on special teams, and I shouldn't have because he's been very good on special teams for the Vikings in this preseason. Joe Huber apologist says, I saw a recent news article suggesting the Vikings should reunite with Cordero Patterson, hinting that he could be a solution to the returner situation and a running back. Do you think this has any merit or offseason clickbait? Also, what are the chances of a Thielen reunion? Both of these are offseason clickbait. You guys should probably learn some new names since 2015 and expand your horizons a bit. Cordero Patterson has admitted himself that he is cooked. Do not think he's coming back. I'd be surprised. Like he himself is like, yeah, I'm washed. Like I'm done. And Carolina is pretty happy with Thielen, so I don't think they're going to let him go anywhere. Farb Schlurf says, CJ Ham just turned 32. The end of his NFL career is probably not very far away. Whenever he decides to hang up his cleats, do you think the Vikings will continue to keep a fullback on their roster, or will he be the last of his kind in purple and gold? That is a great question. I don't see Kevin O'Connell as the kind of guy to keep a fullback, but by that time, fullbacks might be even more in fashion than they are now. Fullbacks are back, baby. They didn't ever really go away. I think more than half the teams have carried a fullback just about every year, but they are back on the incline. And so whenever that happens with CJ Ham, that does make sense, unless they want like an H-back type, like they got a big receiver or a tight end they like there to do that, which they've actually been experimenting with this year on second and third teams with Giovanni Ricci, who hasn't done that job very well, but they are thinking about it. Arnav asks, there has been some talk about how if Brian Flores continues forward with the lawsuit that appeals court has said should go to trial and not NFL arbitration, that the NFL owners will never hire him as a head coach ever again. How do we enjoy the fact that we get an elite defensive coordinator for as long as O'Connell is the head coach with the fact that Flo will never get that HC opportunity? Okay, yeah. So if you missed it, there was a headline, essentially an appeals court said that, like, basically refused to throw the case out. Said, no, this is going to trial. This is a thing. It's going to happen. And you're going to have to, go through the process of litigating Brian Flores' claims. And so that's going to lead to some ugly stuff. There could be discovery and stuff could come out in those processes. I don't know how much of this is going to be public, is going to be made public and, allowed to actually hit the hands of a journalist who will report it. I don't know what Pablo Torre's up to, if he's all over this one or not. But regardless, depending on how ugly this gets, I could see a world where he gets totally blackballed. But like, he is not currently blackballed. He didn't get a head coaching job last cycle, but he got a lot of calls. People were very much willing to consider it, and they all went with other people. But he also is, actively gainfully employed with an NFL franchise with one of those NFL owners, all of whom are buddies and who want to, conspiracize and collude to keep Brian Flores out of the league. Well, they're not doing that right now. He's a defensive coordinator and a very successful one at that for one of those teams. And the Vikings are a team that never wants to make a splash or make waves about this. The Wilfs love to just be rank and file with the owners. They never want to be the guys that stand out or go out on an island and do anything when it comes to their relationship with the rest of the owners. So I don't think that the owners are quite that mad about it. And I do think that someday Brian Flores will get that second chance at a head coaching job. And he wants it. He's been on record saying he wants that to happen, but also that the opportunity has to be right. Scooter asks, since coaches' salaries don't go against the salary cap, why doesn't an owner with deep pockets overpay to create a team with an all-star coaching staff? This sort of thing has happened. Like, the Vikings don't really have like an upper limit to their coaching budget in the same way that they did when it was Red McCombs, and they did have an upper limit to their coaching budget, and they were understaffed in like the Mike Tice era, very famously, right? The Wills don't do that, and that's nice. But it's an economy just like anything else. You're not going to pay $40 million for a coach that'll do it for 10. That's just not good business. And all these guys are businessmen, first and foremost, so they will prioritize that. But I think if money ends up being the reason that a coach is going to pick one place or another, that bidding war will happen, but it will eventually end. And you don't need to pay a dime above what outbids everybody else. That's just economics. Okay, I have a whole bunch more questions, including an entire segment of this mailbag that's just really angry Bears fans who I want to address, and a bunch of your hot takes. That'll be next on Locked On Vikings. Today's episode is brought to you by Yahoo Fantasy. It's getting to be that time, folks. Preseason is starting to come to a close, and that means you got to get your fantasy league set up. And if you still haven't, do it on Yahoo Fantasy. I am using Yahoo Fantasy exclusively this year, and you should too, whether you're a first-timer or a veteran making your millionth league. There's all kinds of ways to play fantasy football on Yahoo, from your classic redraft, PPR leagues to guillotine leagues or eliminators, or all kinds of crazy stuff. To celebrate 28 years of fantasy football greatness, Yahoo Fantasy is dropping 28 big new features over 28 days throughout August. They kicked it off with guillotine leagues, a killer new way to play fantasy football on Yahoo where the lowest scoring team gets eliminated each week until there's one team left standing. With the season around the corner, now's the time to get your league together and give this new mode a try. If you're more into the classics, you can still play in head-to-head private leagues or join a public league. Stay tuned for more killer announcements and start playing Yahoo Fantasy Football now at yahoofantasy.com/LockedOnNFL. Moving on with this mailbag here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. I have a lot of questions I want to get through, so we're going to rapid fire this. I'm sorry if I don't go into as much depth as you want me to, but I will try to get to as many as possible. Another Luke asks, I haven't followed it closely, but it sounds like the Colts QB situation remains undecided. Are there comp pick reasons for us to want Daniel Jones to start this year? The answer to this is probably. I can't say for sure. So Nick Corti is, I think, the authority on this. So if he ever says anything different from what I say in this podcast, go with him. But last he was asked about this, he said he was 90% sure that the Vikings stood to gain a comp pick from Daniel Jones, depending on how well he starts. If he starts so many games, it would move him from a 5th round to a 4th round comp pick, and that would shuffle the formula around where the Vikings would get a much better one. Or they would get 3 comp picks instead of 2, or something like that. I don't fully know what the specifics are, but there would probably be an impact for Daniel Jones to be starting in Minnesota, in Indianapolis. That has been my kind of angle at that. I have been watching that situation with that in mind, saying, go Daniel Jones, please start enough games to qualify for a better comp pick. Mauricio asks, I almost said Mercutio. It's like Romeo and Juliet looking name. Says, how viable do you think trading Dallas Turner is? Gabriel Murphy seems solid. Obviously not as good as Turner, but serviceable. We got 2 studs in front of him. I'm thinking maybe trading him and a second for a great wide receiver like Garrett Wilson or Devonta Smith. I think you're living in fantasy land a little bit. I think it would take more than a, second-year player who had a quiet rookie season and a second rounder to get one of those teams to part ways with one of their core pillars of the offense. So you probably are way overestimating the value that you would get for Dallas Turner. And I don't think that it's viable at all. The Vikings have been pretty clear that they have game planned their season around having 3 strong edge rushers. Grenard, Van Ginkel, Dallas Turner. Having those guys and having them on the field at the same time, rotating them liberally, keeping them all, fresh. Why couldn't I think of that word? having all those resources is like central to their strategy. So I don't think they're going to try to like offload a redundancy. Plus, keeping 5 outside linebackers is the same number they had last year, and there's a pretty obvious 5. So I think that's that. If you're going to start trying to trade guys away, somebody else asked a question about like trading a D tackle for a receiver. It's more likely because there's like 7, maybe even 8 guys that you think are viable. It's more likely that you dump one of those guys that you were going to cut anyways for like a 6-7 swap. But that's more common in cases where like there's guaranteed money on a contract, like guaranteed salary on a contract that you're trying to dump. I think it's just, I don't know, it's the reality. It's a good problem to have. Somebody's going to get cut and he's going to be good and he's going to go to waivers on somebody else. It's the way the league sorts itself out. Gulf of Minnesota Football Party says, between camp clips and the preseason drive, have you seen tangible improvement in Dallas Turner's pass rush bag, or are we falling for offseason best shape of his life propaganda? He looks physically bigger, and I do think that he has gotten stronger and more explosive, faster around the edge. So yes, my answer is yes. The preseason drive was hard to glean too much from. I did go over it on my Patreon page, patreon.com/LukeBrownNFL. I went over the whole first team offense and defense tape all in one big video and focused a lot on Dallas Turner when watching the defense. And I thought he did fine. He always did his job. He was where he was supposed to be. There was one where he got off a block a little bit too late. It turns into a missed tackle. And then there was a coverage moment where he kind of got hung out to dry. There was a run fit moment where he got hung out to dry by what I think was supposed to be Ivan Pace replacing him as he cracked into the B gap. So that some like miscommunication stuff happened, but I don't think a lot of that would like there were no like, oh boy, bad play Dallas Turner. Like we saw last year where we saw like against Atlanta, a tight end take him all the way to the sideline. He dominated physically a tight end in this one. So I would call that improvement. Absolutely. Taking the easy way out, says, are you nervous about the Vikings secondary? Yes, I've been nervous about the Vikings secondary since free agency, and I really think they should have been more serious about it. Don't come crying to me when the Vikings zone is getting shredded by Jared Goff for the 4th year in a row, and you're like, why can't they transition to man coverage? Where are the Brian Flores adjustments? They died in the offseason when you didn't get the personnel to support the adjustment that you need to make. Procrastinating grad student, dude, it's been months. Do the thing. Stop procrastinating. Says, can you talk about the difference between being waived injured and put on IR? Yes. So I did this when Rondale Moore and Zeke Correll were put on those lists respectively. Rondale Moore is on IR. That is a season ending thing. I believe Rondale Moore signed a 2-year contract. Nope, I'm wrong. 1 year, $2 million contract. But either way, IR, when you get put on IR right now, if you don't have a designation to return, which they have a limited amount of times they can designate someone to return, your season is over. Season ending IR. So Rondale Moore's season is officially over. You are just on IR. Waived injured is you get cut, and then if you revert to IR, you get put on that season ending IR. So it's for players who you like want to keep in the building versus players who you would have cut, and contract stuff is different, but it's different like cash flow wise and how much they get paid. With waived injured, you run the risk of another team poaching that player. Let's say somebody twists an ankle and he's got like money in his contract that you want to get rid of. So you cut him and you say waived injured. You can't make the team, can't pass a physical, you're waived. And let's say another team calls you on that bluff and says, he doesn't seem that hurt to me, I'm going to pick him up. They would be rewarded with that player. And if you just put them on IR straight away, they can't do that, but it's more expensive to do that because they get more of their contract. Obviously, too, with somebody like Zeke Correll, if he does heal from that ankle injury in time to play this year and he can pass a physical, he will be released with an injury settlement. You'll see a tiny little headline at some point in the middle of the year. He will basically get the money that he would have made if he were on the roster up to that point, or up to the point where he is healthy, and then he'll be a free agent and free to sign with somebody else for the rest of his healthy weeks. Okay, let's go to the Bears corner. Boy, howdy, you guys are mad. The first one comes from Benjamin, who said, there's a ton of these, who says, I hope you watched Caleb Williams light it up this week and prove your sorry podcaster hater view of him wrong. Boy, I don't think I've been that much of a hater. I had him third in the draft, man. Like, I've been, I think, realistic about him. I think I've been a little annoyed with the sort of anointing that he gets. It's when he does things like, dunk on a preseason defense made of second teamers running vanilla zone coverages. J.J. McCarthy did that. Everybody would be coming out the woodwork being like, well, it was just a preseason and those were backups and blah, 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 blah. I don't know why we don't hear that. The Fox broadcast is saying Super Bowl. Like, man, many of those guys are getting cut, including maybe Damar Hamlin. Probably should be. It's time, Buffalo. But that doesn't mean it was a bad preseason game. It just means that you got to take that with a big old grain of salt, man. Like, it's preseason. And you definitely shouldn't be thumping your chest that hard over a preseason game. Trust me. Trust me. Okay? I've learned that lesson the hard way. Learn from my mistakes. Raul says, Ryan Poles has built the most deep Bears roster in decades? That's the most deep Bears roster in decades? With a young QB who's going to be a superstar, again, presumptuous, all because he accepted that tanking is the right way to build a roster. Meanwhile, Kwesi's competitive rebuild has led to no playoff success and an old roster with worse depth than a team that won 3 games last year. Tell me more about how the Vikings have a better general manager. Yeah, I'll tell you a lot about this. So Ryan Poles as the general manager in 3 years. Okay, look, you take your 1 year off, right? Like that's standard practice. But you got to be really, really careful about this because right now Ryan Poles is, I think, 15-36 as the Bears are 15-36 under Ryan Poles' 3 years. Under the first 3 years of Ryan Pace, they were 14-34. This is like the same pace, pun intended. So you're on a Ryan Pace clip right now, and you've basically had the excuse of, but the future will be good. But if I told you in 2022, yeah, this year sucks, man. You're going 3-14 or whatever it is. I know it sucks, but trust me, in 2 years, you'll be 5-12. Would you have been satisfied with that? Is this rebuild really working? This Bears team needs to be good kind of now, or we have really serious questions. Meanwhile, Kwesi has won more than twice as many of those games. He has not fired the head coach that he hired when he first got here. In fact, that guy just won coach of the year. And there is way more top-end talent. There's no Justin Jefferson on the Chicago Bears. There's no Christian Darrisaw on the Chicago Bears. In fact, their left tackle position is a total mess. I thought Poles was supposed to be the O-line guy. And there's no Jonathan Grenard. Montez Sweat, give me a break. I would say on the flip side, no Jalen Johnson on the Vikings. Like you have that one, and good for you for getting that deal done, right? Keep your talent in house, even though you inherited him. Same as Kwesi with Darrisaw or Jefferson. I give you full credit for that. But I think, again, thumping your chest this hard over a team that has won 15 games in the last 3 years, but still has potential, put up or shut up. Locked On NFL listener says, remember when you ranked Ben Johnson to the Bears as one of your least favorite head coaching hires with Tyler Rowland on Locked On NFL? You can find me Wednesday mornings on Locked On NFL. Are you ready to admit how wrong you were? No. And I'm pretty sure I ranked Ben Johnson third. Didn't I? Wasn't it third of 6? Am I misremembering that? I don't feel like I said one of my least favorite. Did I? Look, I said that I was a little bit weirded out about the complexity of Ben Johnson's scheme and the simplicity that they had to give to Caleb Williams because he was struggling so much behind that line, and how many mental mistakes there were with Williams. This is a genuine concern to me. And I think dunking on vanilla cover 6 is like not assuaging that concern yet. I got to see how he does when the real bullets are flying. Theo Benedette says, how concerned should I be if I was a fan of a team that is having a 4-way competition at left tackle while the O-line coach is calling our top 10 pick right tackle out of shape? Ryan Poles does it again. How much does that concern change if they're maybe, for example, playing week 1 and 2 against Pro Bowl / All-Pro edge rushers from 2024? Apparently not concerned at all. And one more thing, by the way. So in 2022, Kwesi blew the 32nd overall pick on Lewis Cine. Terrible thing. In that same calendar year, Ryan Poles did something worse with the 32nd overall pick, which was trade for Chase Claypool. Cam Extorm says, is a good drive for a first-team offense against an opponent's backup defense actually impressive, or is it just vaporware? I like how the mailbag sometimes resolves itself. One last question. It's from CJ's Hammer, who asks, what would it take for Max Brosmer to be QB2? There were a ton of questions about this in the mailbag, about Brosmer, Rippin, and all of that. I am putting a pin in all of that and dedicating an entire show to it tomorrow. Or maybe later in the week, because I got a cool guest tomorrow. But put a pin in all that, and we will circle back to it. Let's instead go to your hot takes on the Locked On Vikings podcast. This episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by FanDuel. It is America's #1 sportsbook, and it is America's #1 sportsbook for a reason. Hey, if you are a hate-listening Bears fan, go ahead and you can bet on week 1 right now, or any futures bet. But right now, the Vikings are favored by 1.5. So if you think the Bears are going to absolutely stick it to the Vikings at home, you can take them plus 1.5 or their money line at plus 112. You can do that right now. You can also take the Chicago Bears to make the playoffs. That is currently at FanDuel plus 184, almost 2-1 odds there. Vikings at an even plus 100 to make the playoffs right now if you prefer that. Whatever you're trying to do it at FanDuel right now for just 24 hours on August 26th. It's FanDuel Futures Days. So they're giving you huge deals on NFL season predictions, passing totals, win totals, make the playoffs, Super Bowl MVP, that kind of thing. So whether you are eyeing your MVP, your long shot division winner, or you just want to waste some money on the Bears, visit the FanDuel app today and start planning your futures bets now, because Futures Day is one day and one day only. FanDuel, play your game. Let's get to your spicy takes here on the Locked On Vikings podcast. When the season starts, I think I'm going to transition this to bold predictions, and we're going to move this to here, just to get a little bit more time to preview games. But maybe I'll keep it. I don't know. We're going to vibe it out. The first one comes from Luke Braun's Wrong, who says, yes, JJ is in a better place than Drake, but I would not trade JJ for Drake straight up. JJ is a better decision maker, stronger arm, better pocket presence than Drake may. I'm confused why people think he's got a weak arm. His throw at the combine was literally 1 mile per hour less than Joe Milton. The last part is neither here nor there, but regardless, JJ is better than Drake. Okay, yeah, so I'm going off of my draft take. My draft take had Drake May above JJ McCarthy, and we just haven't seen a lot from Drake May one way or another. We've seen nothing from JJ McCarthy one way or another, so I'm still just kind of rolling with my draft take. It's no deeper than that. That's all that take is. The arm strength thing you're very much cooking on. That's very true. The idea that he has a weak arm is stupid. It's just people seeing a low depth of target at Michigan and forgetting that was Michigan, and then just like jumping to the conclusion that it must be because JJ McCarthy has a weak arm. But those people are unserious, and they're not actually looking at the football in front of them. They're looking at stat sheets. I'm about to skim the box scores and argue with someone who watched the whole game. Arif, not Hassan, oh God, they're multiplying, says the Vikings will trade Jalen Redmond for Adam Thielen with the Panthers, and Adam Thielen will be wide receiver 3 for the season. Sure, I already kind of talked about that won't happen. Carolina's not letting him go. Certainly not for Jalen Redmond. You're insane. But it is the hot take thing. Christine says the week 1 game at Soldier Field will see the Chicago Bears win 38-7, tying the largest win differential in the Bears-Vikings all-time series, with Ben Johnson's offense dropping more than 594 yards in a game and Caleb Williams making JJ McCarthy look silly. Well, Christine, picture this. The Vikings are playing the Bears at Soldier Field. The Vikings have dominated the entire game. JJ McCarthy runs in one last touchdown and turns to the stands and screams, "I'm going to effing own you for the next 10 years. I'm smiling right now. The next one comes from Matthew, who says, this is based off of my Twitter timeline and your last few mailbag episodes, but my hot take is that the Vikings-Bears rivalry is and has been more hot than the Vikings-Packers or Bears-Packer rivalry ever since 2022, which had the Vikings and Bears in dueling rebuilds, comparing their teams all the time. I guess, man, Packers fans aren't doing this to me, even though I do speak ill of Jordan Love often. Bringing Skull to Newcastle says Max Brosmer will not make the roster and he will never throw a regular season pass in the NFL. Local media and fans are obsessed with him because he played at the U of M, but his play has ranged from mediocre to terrible. Jaron Hall had a way better preseason. This is a really long one, so I'm skipping some. Jaron Hall had a way better preseason last year, including a 90.4 PFF grade against the Browns, and he was a 5th-round draft pick by the Vikings, yet the team still picked Rippon over him. The Vikings will stick with Rippon again this year. Okay, a couple things. You may be new here, bringing Skull to Newcastle. I do not heed PFF grades. I do not care what PFF grade Jaron Hall got in a preseason game. I do think I agree that he had a better preseason, but the PFF grade won't go anywhere for me. The other thing is I am not a Gophers fan. I've never have been. So him being a Gopher is no different than him being from Nebraska or Miami. Like, I don't care. So that's not getting into my evaluation of him, which I will get into way more detail about, but very quickly, I do think he's outplayed Brett Rippon in this preseason pretty handily. Brett Rippon, they picked Brett Rippon over him, but they weren't directly competing, Jaron Hall and Brett Rippon. Brett Rippon was in another organization. The circumstance is very different there. Kyle says Max Brosmer is the Brock Purdy to JJ McCarthy's trade. Oh, I'm sorry. My conclusion is that Brosmer should be QB3 over Rippon. That is the opinion that I'm going to defend tomorrow. And it is based on nothing but his play. I promise I don't really. I was, in fact, kind of as annoyed as you were that like they were kind of that Minnesota people were just like, whoa, the Minnesota guy, and kind of not looking any deeper into that. But there is something to find if you do. Kyle says Max Brosmer is the Brock Purdy to JJ McCarthy's Trey Lance, and the Vikings would win more games if he was starting over the handoff merchant we drafted top 10. I got nothing, man. I respect it. Sterling says, I seem to remember you saying that Zamiah Vaughn turns like a freighter. If we look at recent history, what better thing is there to block the Suez Canal but a freighter? Zamiah Vaughn is going to be CB3 by midseason and will keep opposing QBs under a 50 passer rating when targeting him. Okay, so injuries could make this happen, and like one interception, right? And like sample size shenanigans could do this. So you kind of could backdoor it that way, but to get this in spirit, yeah, that would be a pretty good call. You should save that for season-long bold predictions, which we will do next week. Final one comes from Unlucky Jackson, who says, I have a few ice cold takes to set up a scorching hot take. The first cold take is the Vikings will be a better team than last year, but their record will regress. It's pretty cold. The second one is McCarthy will show signs of greatness and his fair share of rookie mistakes. Also, like a very balanced, easy to hit, I'm playing both sides kind of take. 3 is the Vikings either lose their first postseason game or lose a de facto play-in game and look completely inept. JJ will look like a true rookie, and the Flores defense will be exposed in this game. That's how the last 2 seasons have ended. And now for the hot take, to return us to global warming from absolute zero. Vikings fans, including the depths of Reddit and Twitter, will react to the season rationally, and the vibe will be optimism for next season. No one will be calling for heads to be cut off, and we will love an optimistic harmony all off season. Yeah, you and I both know that you're living in fantasy land there. That's not hot. That's just impossible. That's like saying, I'm gonna lift a train by myself. That's not a hot take. That's just wrong. I will see you all tomorrow for some Max Brosmer talk and a very special guest. And as always, Skull.